StatSeeker's new dashboarding component was added in version 5.50. You can see on this server we're currently running a 5.51 install. This server was upgraded from pre-5.5, so when I mouse over dashboards here, you can see that we've got our new dashboarding system running side by side with our legacy dashboarding system. When you do upgrade to 5.5 and above, you're not losing any of your existing dashboarding functionality. They will run side by side. If you do a fresh install, the legacy dashboarding system is hidden by default, but it's still there, and you can enable that via some settings in the admin tool. The default landing page for dashboards is the dashboard home. And here you can see we've got favorited dashboards that have recently been viewed, and the StatSeeker default dashboards. These are dashboards which come with every StatSeeker installation. Everything else here are dashboards that I've created and added on this server. And over on the right, we've got some release notes, news if we're adding new functionality. We might use this area to actually distribute new dashboards, which can simply be downloaded via this panel here and added to your StatSeeker server. The star option here to make dashboard favorites, it's just click to add. If I click those two, they will, as soon as I refresh the browser, they'll be added in here, and likewise removing them. That starring functionality is available here in the dashboard home, in managed dashboards, and in the dashboards themselves. Now there's a lot of benefits with the new dashboarding system over the legacy dashboarding system. Let's just jump into one of these and have a quick look. This is one of the StatSeeker default dashboards. It's the asset overview. Very similar component-wise to what you'd be used to seeing in the legacy dashboards. Dashboard made up of panels. Each panel is essentially a report. It could be graphs, tables. We've got single stats which can function as gauges and things like that. In addition, we've got in here are some variables which can be accessed by all the dashboard panels to dynamically apply filters. If I jump into this one here, let's grab the device overview. At the moment, we've got a group selection, so this is all the StatSeeker groups. If I jump into the console, you can see all the StatSeeker groups. They are duplicated in this list here. Likewise, all the devices are available, and this device list is populated by the group selections. At the moment, we've got all groups. If I drop it down to just say Athens, this device variable here is now restricted to just the devices inside the Athens group. The first one in the list has been selected, and with that selection, every panel on the dashboard has been updated to be focused on this device instead. If I jump into the Athens Switch 4, you can see everything changes to match. Immediately it's far greater scope and flexibility over the legacy dashboarding system. Now these default dashboards, if we jump into the managed dashboards, this is an area where you can view the existing dashboards, move them into different folders, and change permissions on those dashboards, with exception to the default dashboards folder and the contents of the default dashboards folder. So these four dashboards are the four StatSeeker default dashboards that come with the StatSeeker installation or the upgrade to 5.5, and you're unable to edit the permissions, access to, or the content of any of these dashboards. As we push out upgrades to StatSeeker, we might be including updates to some of these default dashboards. So if you've edited the default dashboards, when we push out the update, you'd lose your changes. So these default dashboards can't be edited by you, but you can make a copy of them and apply your edits to those. That's something that I'll touch on in just a sec. First of all, we'll just roll through these default dashboards to have a quick look at them. So we started off, the first one we looked at a little second ago was the asset overview. So you can see total number of devices, how many are being monitored through SNMP. We've got a few ping onlys. We've got a retired device in there. A little bit of inventory stuff, such as devices by vendor, some indication of where we've got free interfaces, interface counts by speed, upper status and admin down monitored interfaces. A little bit of Mac IP, as you can see on this sim, there's not much going on the Mac IP side. We haven't really configured it for that, but if you're getting a bit of functionality out of Mac IP, then this default dashboard would give you a little bit of insight as to what you can do within the dashboards and a starting point for building your own Mac IP dashboards. But we've got a couple of those standalone, which are in the works at the moment anyway. The device overview, which was the other one that we saw briefly, so whether the device is up or down. We've got a time filter up in the top right, so over that period of today, its availability through that period. As you can see, you've got a small outage just in here. And as you saw then, as I zoomed in, just click and drag to zoom in on a place within one of the graphs, that updated the time filter, and that time filter was passed through to all of these panels. And so all of the data in those panels updates to sit with the time filter. The latency and the state and the CPU load, these are current values, so they ignore whatever's in the time filter. Whenever we do update the time filter, it refreshes this dashboard, and at that point, these guys may refresh, but they ignore the time filter and just grab the current values, the current state, latency, and CPU load. But everything else listens to the time filter being used. In the time filter, we've got all of our time filter favorites. That includes the ones from the default StatSeeker install, as well as you can see here, there's a few which I've added in, which are custom time filters. There is some restriction about which custom time filters can be used in the dashboards. If you've got some custom time filters available in the console, which have multiple ranges or exception rules built into the time filter, so business hours for the entire month except for every second Thursday, something like that, they're fine for custom reporting and they're fine in the console. Those sorts of time filters aren't going to work in your dashboards though. Okay. So we were just looking at the device overview down the bottom. We've got a little some interfaces coming through on that one. If I go to the Athens router, we'll get some interface traffic. As you saw, you can select, click and drag to select a period. You can select a series, as I'm going to do here, to isolate it. Hold down Control for multi-select. Click again to reset it back to its default state. Up in the top left of some of these panels, you can see there's a link. So this will link, it's an availability report, so it'll link to the ping outages. Where we've got our in and out utilization, this will link through to another dashboard, the interface overview. So this is the third of these default dashboards. So it passes through our selection. We were looking at the Athens router, so it passes through that and pre-populates the group and device variables from the link that we clicked on. So you come into the interface overview with that device already selected. And now we've got a couple more variables at top end that you can use, as well as an interface variables. At the moment that's set to all, so this will be all of the interfaces on that Athens router. And they work as well as all the others. You can see that while this is a single select, the interface is a multi-select, so you can grab a selection of interfaces if you want. As soon as I click out of there, it updates and updates all the panels for you. So an interface overview. So interface identification, bit of configuration data such as polling, opera status and admin status, speeds, utilization, total traffic, that sort of thing, utilization over time, events over time, so it'll be the admin status and opera status changes, discards and errors, and some total traffic. And below that you can see we've got individual rows for each of the interfaces. But you can get that same information just by isolating one from the variable and updating these panels here. Okay. So that was the asset, the default, and the interface, and the last one is a network summary. And this is probably the closest to the default dashboard from the legacy dashboarding system, the old admin dashboard. This is probably the closest to what was available there. Total number of down devices, up devices, recent device state changes, things like that, threshold breaches, that sort of a thing will be covered in the events. Some details on those down devices, which are up in here. And as you can see, it's quite an unhealthy network that we're simulating here. So I've got lots of up and down device events to demonstrate different things. Some ping delay, and then some top 10 utilization errors, discards. But again, you've got your top in there to you can drop that down to 5 and everything will update. So then these become top 5, whatever's going to work for your organisation. But as I said, these guys can't be edited. Clicking on the header, I've got view and I can share the access to it, but I can't edit any of these guys. If I did want to edit one of these dashboards, you have to make a copy of it. You can edit the copy. So over in the dashboard settings in the top right, I can jump in here and click Save As and give it a name and drop it in a folder. Don't drop it back into the default folder because, as I said, it may get removed. So you can see we've got the option to make a new folder. And you can see here that I've actually got a folder specifically for editable versions of the default dashboards. So if you are making editable copies, don't drop them in the default dashboards, put them somewhere else, a specialized folder if you like. Every StatSeeker dashboard user has access to the general folder. So if you want them to be accessible to all your users, you can drop it into the general folder. But each of these other folders, they've all got specific permissions as to who can see them, who can edit them, things like that. So I'm going to drop it into here and just update the name as well and save it. And it takes me straight into that copy that I've got. And as you can see here, I can now edit the dashboard itself. Any of the panels. If you want to move panels within a dashboard, it's just grab and drag the header and they all move around to suit. Likewise, bottom right corner for the resize. Okay. So I guess the next thing is to actually look into how you go about building these dashboards. So the first thing I'll do is jump into my dashboard home or manage dashboards. You can see over here I've got the ability to add a folder, add a dashboard, or import a dashboard configuration. Likewise in manage dashboards, any of the dashboards I've got, I can move them to a new folder, add a dashboard, add a folder, same controls as we had in the dashboard home. So I'm going to add a new dashboard. The first thing I get is adding a new panel, and these are the panel types that we've currently got available. There's some more in the works. This selection will continue to grow throughout consecutive StatSeeker releases. So the panel types being a graph, the single stat. If I jump into let's look at my default. So the single stat are these guys here. So we've got a single value or a single state or a gauge. All of these guys are different variations on the single stat panel. Tables, they're text HTML. That's something we'll touch on. That's how you can drop any third-party web content into one of these panels. Rows, which are used for organizing. As you can see here, I can collapse the row. Everything collapses underneath it.
clocks, pie charts, and the world map. And this is something that we're going to play with a little later on in the session. It's quite fun. But first things first, we'll just grab a graph. And that jumps in with an empty graph. And to actually start configuring it, you go back up to the header and jump into Edit. The tab on the left, General tab, it contains the name, descriptions. If you want to add links to your dashboard, that'll be the links that'll pop up in the top left-hand corner. The metrics tab is where you go about configuring, if you like it to be like configuring a report. This configures the query as to what are we going to show on this panel. You can then go through the axes and the legend and the display, and that'll deal with your presentation of the data and the axes, presenting that data, and then time range overrides. We'll touch on each of these things as we go. Okay, so for your graph type, the first thing we've got is a query type at the moment. We've got it set to standard. There's also an event count. If you're looking at histograms and things like that, then you'd be looking for an event count. But for this initial build, we'll be looking just a standard query type. And then you jump into your object. So this is exactly the same as what you'd be doing in custom reporting. When you go and try and grab this guy and grab a new report. Bear with me, it'll just take a second. When I jump into the report data type, so these are all the StatSeeker objects that you can report on. That's exactly the same as what we're looking at here for this object. Broken down into technologies, you can go through and select whichever one you're after. Likewise, you can just start typing and go, if I'm going to be looking at, say, interface metrics, then I could go down to the interface and just grab the generic interface or frame relay, if that's what you were after. Or you can actually just start typing and it will filter that list based on what your input is, and then you can select from that one there. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're just going to grab interface. What fields would I like? So again, all the fields associated with this interface object, this is exactly the same as what you're used to seeing in custom reporting, or if you've been playing around with the API. All the fields associated with that interface object. Name, pulse date, configuration fields for that interface, event fields, state and status changes, and then you've got all your time series data, as well as a link back to the device, the parent device. So again, all of the fields that sit at the device object level, including time series data at the device level being ping state, event fields being ping state, and the time series data at the device level being all of your time series ping data. Okay, so what I'm going to do to start with, we'll just go and look at basic utilization. As you can see, under time series, we've got them all there. I can just browse through the list and select inbound utilization. And then you've got the data format. Now, most of these are going to be used for tables and single stats and things like that. To actually plot time series data over time, you want the raw values. So we go down to values down at the bottom of the list. So we've got our inbound utilization values. And if you know what it's called, you can again just start typing and it will just filter that list down for you. Okay, so we've got in and outbound utilization, and if I hit refresh now, it's just going to go away and grab that for us, and we'll have a quick look. Okay, so we've got a limit here with defaults to 50, so I've got 50 interfaces, and I've got the inbound and outbound utilization. The problem is we don't know what these interfaces are or where they are. We jump into our label, and every field available on the interface is here, so I can use an interface name. And then if I refresh, I've got interface names. But I don't know what device they're on, not too helpful. So again, we've got that link to device, and I can use the device name. I can drag these to reorder them. So I've got device name, interface name, refresh now, and I can see I've got the device name and the interface name and the metric that's coming back for each of these series. Okay, so I've just got a random 50. Looks like it's grabbed the first device it's found. It was the San Jose core, and it's just started pulling interfaces off them and plotting them on the graph. I've got the option here to sort or apply filters, so I can actually specify which devices and which interfaces I want to look at. Yeah, if I was to use something like filters, I can filter that to a specific device, where the device name equals Athens router was that device that we looked at previously, and refresh, and as you can see it's brought it down to just the Athens router. If I was looking at something a little broader, I could use, say, matches and remove the router and then grab everything with Athens in the name. Likewise, I could use device configuration fields. Where are we? Location. Every device where the location matches Athens or equals Athens. And then we've got all of the first 50 interfaces from devices in Athens. But if I'm only interested in ones that have a high utilization, then I can start applying a sort. So time series data, let's sort by our outbound utilization average, descending. So the interfaces with the highest outbound utilization, they're going to be the guys that come back, and I don't really want 50, let's just grab 5. Okay, so you can see here that these are the noisiest interfaces from every device in the location of Athens. If I had a group that I could filter on, I could use that. Again, you can just start typing, or I could just go through and grab, say, routers. So now I've got a group filter, so any device, all devices in the group's router, but I've also got this filter here. So they will be combined, and it looks like I'll only be grabbing routers in Athens, which I presume will only return the single Athens router. If I delete that filter, I'll then just get every interface on every device in the routers group. And we'll get interfaces from routers all over the place. Now, one of the things that we saw in those default dashboards was the data being here in these panels being driven by a dashboard variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly save this one. All right. And so let's go about adding one of those variables in there. So that's a dashboard setting. So open dashboards, dashboard variables. So I'm going to add a new variable, and we were looking at a device variable. So I'm going to give it a name. Oh, there we go. And this will be the name that is referenced by filters and things like that in the panels. So I can give it a label which will override for display purposes. So if I call it something like that, and it's already defaulted 2 devices. There are some other ones, device and group being the 2 most commonly used ones, but then we've got everything in there, all those different objects are available in there for you to select from again. But the common types being device and group are the most useful fellows. I'm going to sort it alphabetically, and I'm not going to select a multi-value or an all option. It will be a single select. And then I'll hit add. And back in the dashboard, I've now got that variable sitting here. I can go through and select different devices in there. But as you can see, it's not changing anything in the panel. The panel has not been configured to listen to the variable at all. So if I go down to filters, I'm going to delete that group filter, and I'm going to use this filter option in here. And because I've added this devices one, you can remember we named it devices, but I stuck on a my devices label. So this is the reference. So it's going to filter to the current value of the device variable, Athens switch 2. So when I refresh, it's Athens switch 2, and now when I change it, the panel updates to it. This variable I can also use to populate the title. So let's go with $devices util. Did I call it $device? I did. Okay, so that's our Athens router util. Likewise, as I go and change it, the title will change to update as well as the data. Okay, so over in our axes, we can now go and start working on how we're going to present this data. Apply units, so we've got percentage on the y-axis. I'm going to go percent. As you can see, there's no data which is topping 40%, so it's topped out at 50. So that's auto the min and max. You can always override that. Decimals, change the label which is being used, things like that. Over in Legend, so this is a legend down the bottom showing our current data series being brought in. I'm going to present it as a table to the right, so I've got them over here. And because it's a table to the right, I can also add a few of these values if I'd like. So show me the average utilization, the maximum utilization. And then as I go and change these guys, we've got that change in here. Okay, so we're limiting to like 5, but as you can see, we're pulling in 2 data series for each interface, inbound and outbound. So this is a little busy. Over in the display tab, where we've gone and set our axes and legends and the basic draw options here, so I can change it between lines and bars. You can actually apply series specific overrides. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an override. This is a regex expression, so I'm going to grab everything with, as you can see here, all the inbound util has got RX in the name, so anything with RX in the series name. And then you can start applying overrides, so you can then override, do I want lines or bars? Or what I'm going to do here is drop it onto a negative y-axis. And when I jump back into these guys here, because I've overridden that to auto, it didn't automatically swap, but if I had left it at auto, it would have automatically dropped in and given us the negative y-axis for our inbound utilization and the normal y-axis for our outbound utilization. I can also apply a threshold in there. So what I'm going to do is, just to make it a little bit easier to see where those guys are, I'm going to drop one in at 0 just to give us a nice defining line in there. Get rid of the fill, and the colour I will just make it black. Okay. Resize that guy to suit. All right. So you've got in your edit, you've got your draw options for your panel wide display of data, and then you've got the option to override any of those draw options by a specific series. Okay. So we've looked at object types, adding and removing fields, the use for labels for your graphs, how to drop in filters. You can filter by group, start applying device or interface filters or attribute filters in here. Again, we could filter to only show me interfaces where the average utilization is greater than 70% or something like that.
and how to filter dynamically via the inclusion of a dashboard level variable. One of the guides we haven't looked at is the group by, and this is using being able to aggregate data. And that's something which I think I'll jump into right now. So let's look at total traffic maybe. So if I get rid of our inbound and outbound utilization, and instead we jump in here and I grab total bytes, and let's look at total byte values. So we're still running this filter at the moment, but if I hit refresh now, you can see we've got total bytes and we've got a percentage because we've still got this axis down as percent. So what I'm going to do is just change that one to bytes. There we go. And in this display, we no longer need our threshold, so let's delete that. And we no longer need our series override, so I'll delete that too. Okay, so at the moment, we're looking at Auckland Switch 3, and we're looking at total bytes through each of these interfaces. What I'm going to do now is drop in a group filter and remove our variable filter. So now when I refresh, we're still only getting 5, but we're getting the 5 busiest interfaces out of every device in the routers group. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to aggregate it across the entire device by grouping by the device name. Refresh. And so now we're getting the highest traffic through the entire device rather than through an individual interface. We're aggregating all the interfaces on a device, and we're looking at the routers with the highest traffic going through them over this reporting period. And as you can see, it's been identified as these routers here. But you'll remember we added the interface name as part of the label. And because we're aggregating data, it's not down to a single interface. So that part of the label is coming back as a null. I'll just delete it. There we are. Likewise, if you're looking at something like CPU load for multi-core devices, rather than a single series for each CPU on the device, you could aggregate by the device and then plot the we don't want average, we want total. We want total traffic. There we go. If you're looking at CPU load on a device, then you'd use average for the average load across each of the cores on the device. It gives you an idea of the device load rather than just one core spiking, which is perfectly normal. But for total traffic across a device, we're going to aggregate by the device and present the total. Again, you've got the options in here for average and counts and things like that. Maximums across every series that you're per device that you're grouping by, things like that. Okay. Okay, so we've looked at very quickly how to go about configuring your fields, applying filters, dropping in labels, sorting your data, filtering by variables, and some aggregation, all within the graph panel. Now, very similar stuff can be applied to your other panel types. Let's have a quick look at the single stat.
Okay, so jumping into edit mode, same layout as the graph panel, general tab for your title and description and your links, metrics tab for building your query, some presentation, and then your time filter override. Now, we've got an extra one dropped in on the query type. You've now got an entity count. We'll run through these quickly. So standard type, let's do something like, as you've seen in the device overview, current ping, something like that. So ping sits on the device object, and so the field is a time series field, ping round trip time, and we grab our ping round trip and just hit go. We're now getting the average ping time for all devices on the network over the last, at the moment we've got last 7 days. If you want to narrow that one down, we need to drop in some filters and an override for the time filter. So again, we can point it straight to a device using our variable that we previously set up. So now we've got our ping time for all of today, average ping for the entire day for Auckland. Same for the Athens server, but it's average ping for the entire day, so maybe not too useful. Let's look at current ping. We drop in our override in here, 90 seconds, and there's our current ping value. For presentation, we can look at units, so time, milliseconds for our ping. Additional labels, if you like. Then you can play with font sizes for those labels. And then we've got the option to actually apply some panel coloring. So if I'd like to say 0 through to 40 milliseconds, and then 40 through to 60. Now these should overlap. Because the calculations in the background go to many decimal places, if you went 40 to 41, any 40 point something would fall in between these two and wouldn't take up any colouring at all. When they do overlap, the orange is going to take precedence over the green for the 40, if it was exactly. And then for 60 through to 120, and we'll make that guy red. And then you can apply the colouring to the panel background or to the panel value, or if you're running any of these ping and post fixes, you can drop it in there as well. The other option that you've got is the gauge. So you can run it in as the gauge. It drops your colour ranges on the gauge, your markers, which you can turn on and off, and then your labels as well. Okay, so if I get rid of the prefix and then drop the value size down to 70, we get something which is fits a little bit easier in there. So now we're looking at our current ping value for our Athens server. If you do leave the top end off the range, it just tops out at what you've got in there as the start. So do drop one in there. Okay, what I'll do now is just quickly save that one. Device ping with a C would be good. Okay. We'll grab another one. And again, these things, they all resize to fit the content, the panel space, and the content resizes to fit the size of the panel. So the next query type is the event count, and the event types on offer are device and interface events. So ping events, if upper status, if admin status changes, are all under event. Any of the thresholds that you've configured in StatSeeker that you're alerting on, any threshold trigger records an event which you can report on, and any syslog or SNMP trap data which is being forwarded onto your StatSeeker server, all of those messages are available there to as events to report on as well. So let's quickly look at something very quick and simple, like a device ping down events. So the event type, I'll just do a matches so I can be a little lazy on the content for the filter. So the event type is going to match a ping, so it'll be a ping event, and the state equals down. So all down events on the network. We'll set this guy to today. So 363 down events on the network. I can bring that into the last 8 hours. You can filter to a specific group, same as the graph panel. So last 8 hours from devices in the switches group, only 48, and you can always filter according to a device from a variable or specifically from a device by putting a device specific filter in. Do we get anything from Athens Switch 1 in the last 8 hours? 1 from there, but you can always specifically mention a device, dropping in a device filter in here. Okay, let's look at the third of the query types, which is entity count. So everything that StatSeeker monitors is considered an entity. So a device is an entity, an interface on that device, because it sits under the interface object, that's a separate entity. Likewise, a CPU or a memory module on a device, they're all entities. So you can use entity counts, very simple things like config fields, how many devices, since that's the object type I've got, have a location that matches London. So how many devices are in London? In the London office, there's 12. Again, config something like vendor matches Cisco. How many Cisco devices on the network? That sort of a thing. You can also look at device states again. So something like event fields, current ping state. Let's look at the current ping state equals down. How many down devices have I got on my network right now? 68, so up will be 308. And then you can do the same thing across time series. So how many devices currently have an average ping time greater than 60 milliseconds? 10. There we go. All right. Let's move on to the map panel, I guess. That's what I will do. As you've noticed, I've gone and saved a couple of points, and there's a few times where there's been quick saves and stuff like that run. So if I jump into the dashboard settings, under versions, we've got a range of states for the dashboard since I initially built it and when I added those guys. And as you can see, there's a few in here that I've actually pulled out of this video when they were being done. But I can restore to any previous state on the dashboard. So I can go back to when we first added a single stat. And then, as you can see, that restoration is put in as a new state, so you don't lose where you just left from. If I jump back in here, so I've just got the one in there without those changes that we made, still back on the event count. Okay, so as you're going through and building your dashboards, feel free, save as often as you like, put notes against the save so you've got your states that you can roll back to if that's going to be useful for you. Let's have a quick look at the map panel. Okay, this one is going to be quite different to the others. When it comes into the query type, it's only two. We've got a value by location and a count by location. So we'll start off with the value by location. Now, before this map panel can be used, you need to add latitude and longitude data for all of the devices that StatSeeker is monitoring. Now, you can go about doing that from within the console. I can grab a single device, and if I look at the device details, general device details, we can see in here that I can actually drop in a latitude and longitude value for those guys. So you can do it individually, which could be a little slow. You can also do it through auto grouping from the admin tool. You can go and do a grouping rule which grabs all your devices based on their location setting or based on a subnet. If you've got devices in separate offices tied into a specific subnet. However you're grouping them, you can do that, and then you can actually use, if we just quickly jump in here and add a rule. Device. As soon as I've dropped group type in, I've got this option to show advanced options. And in here, you can do your grouping rule like you normally would. And when it comes to the configuration, you can actually drop in there latitude and longitude and set them auto grouping wise. Nice and quick and easy to do it that way as well. You can also do it via the API. Okay, so once you've actually got latitude and longitude data assigned to your devices, you can then start using the map panel, and you can do something like we've got here. Let's see, we've been playing a lot with ping, so let's just go back to ping, time series, average ping, and average within a location. And there we go. So I can mouse over, it gives me details of what the average ping amongst those devices in that location is, and some details about the actual devices in there. Excuse me. Over in the world map panel, we can start playing with a few things like the presentation. So I'll drop that guy down to 20, stroke to 1, and I like a mouse zoom. Okay. And we've got the option here to be, again, color coding. So ping values up to 45 milliseconds as green, add another row. 45 to 60 as orange, and then 60 and up as red. You can see the legend automatically updates based on the values I've dropped in there. What's actually being presented is automatically updated for us. The option to drop in your units, so milliseconds for both of those. And I can, because I've got that mouse wheel zoom set, I can just zoom in and out as needed to get a better look at where we're at. And you can mouse over to see what you've got going. By default, this map panel builds a drill down link from any of the nodes you click on. So as you can see here, I'm looking at Lisbon. If I click this node, it's going to fire me off to a new report, which is going to give me details of the devices in that location, system name, and their average ping. And this again has a further drill down, which will take us straight to the device overview filtered to that specific device. If I click this guy, it'll take me to the device overview looking at the Lisbon switch too. All right. Oh, and when you are looking at current ping, don't forget to drop in your time filter override. That will give us current ping rather than average over whatever time filter is displayed in the dashboard time selector. Okay, so that's a map panel, and let's have a quick look at the other config for the map panel, which is the count by location. Okay, there's a couple of examples I'd like to have a quick look at here. First one, we'll look at an interface metric, and we'll filter on a config state, which is our interface 90 day, which is simply equals 0. This will be saying that the interface has not been used in the last 90 days. Interface has been used in the last 90 days. Interface hasn't. And it's just, has there been any traffic across that interface at all? Okay. And then, of course, we need to go in there and color this. So this is a count of how many interfaces in each of these locations. So again, let's just make that one because I don't like the big fat lines. Okay, so 0 to 50, if I've only got 50 free interfaces, that can be something to worry about. 50 to 200 free interfaces. 200 to 500. Actually, let's make that one green, and 500 and better. There we go. So I can at a glance see where I've got lots of free infrastructure, and potentially mouse wheel zoom, and potentially where I don't. To make that a little easier, let's go minimum size is 4, and then I can see what I've got here. Minimum size is 6. There we go. So I've only got 26 free interfaces on the hardware available in Singapore, whereas we've got a whole bunch over here. Okay. So that's a quick look at the count by location, and there's another version of the count by location where we're going to change the way we're looking at how we're colouring. Rather than colouring by range, we're going to colour by query, and that's quite an interesting one. So I'll just jump back into our metrics, and I'll change this one to device, and we'll look at event fields ping state equals up. All right, so now we've just got devices which are currently up. If I jump back in here, we've still got our colour by value, so you can see I can go and colour by how many are up here and there. But what I'm interested in doing is, rather than just seeing how many devices are up, I'd like to be able to see how many devices are up and down on the same graph. So what I'm going to do is I can add another query, and rather than have ping state equals up, you can just change it to ping state equals down. You've also got the option over here to just duplicate it and save you the building time if you've done something clever in there. And then ping state equals down. When I jump back into the world map option now, I've got a different set of colouring options. You coloured by query. So our first query, our filter is up. So I can apply a label up to that one and down to that one. And again, you've got your colour options in there that you can go and set as you need to. And now I've got both up and down devices on the same graph coloured differently, so I can see where down devices are in comparison to how many up devices in the same location. So as you can see here, I've got a lot of test devices which are currently offline, so there's a whole bunch which are currently down, and I've got just the 3 which are up in this location. But you've got instances here which would be more typical, where the number of down is less than the number of up. So when I mouse over this, all I can see is the up devices, and I can't get a separate reading for the down devices. The Z index, which one is on top, is just determined by the order of the colour mappings. So I can just grab this guy and drag him up to the top, and you can see it's already changed here. So now I can mouse over the France office and see that I have 15 up and just the 1 down. Likewise, how many I've got up and how many down, and then you can just adjust the circle size to better suit the numbers you're getting, so you can easily mouse over the 2 options without having to be too fiddly about it. Okay, but other than that, it's exactly the same. It's just the difference in how you're mapping by colour, and it's being done by the queries that you've passed through. All right. Back in our dashboard, I'll just quickly show you tables. When you've got a table, everything that you drag above the table is separate. When a table is open, as soon as you close it, every panel, no matter where it is, that resides underneath that row, as soon as I collapse it, they're all going to be contained within the row. And then click it to expand again. If you've got a fairly busy dashboard with a whole bunch of panels on there, as you can see with, it's probably best seen back in our default dashboards. If I look at something like a device overview, and let's grab Athens server, you can see we've got a few rows tucked away in, a couple of rows. Actually, the interface would be a better example. Default dashboards, interface overview. Let's grab Athens switch 1. It's a switch, so it's got a whole range of interfaces on there, and they're all collapsed. When I go and change the time filter, and I push this one out to 60 days, it's only updating the data contained within the panels which are currently visible. These guys, and as you can see, there's a great many of them, pushing out to 60 days data for every single interface on this switch. Could be quite a number of API calls, quite a bit of data coming back in, could take a little bit of time. So if they are in a collapsed row, they're not updated. They don't update until you open the row, and then you can see it there sending off the query and pulling back the data. If you do have a very busy dashboard with a lot of panels, and you might be looking at something with a lot of data series, such as the number of interfaces on a switch, which can get quite high, and a large reporting period, so a large amount of data, you can use the rows and collapse them to just pull it in for the panels you want to update, just to speed things up for you. Again, it probably won't be an issue, but it's nice to know that it's there just in case you do bump into it as being a bit of a problem for you. Okay. A little bit of time left. Let's look at something like our text HTML panel. This is quite a handy fellow. Set it to Markdown or HTML, and then any content you drop in here is rendered into the panel just as it would if it was being viewed as an HTML page or a Markdown page in a browser. The other option being link, and this allows you to bring in any external content into your StatSeeker dashboards. So I can just drop in a URL, so I'll be pointing off to the StatSeeker doc site and refresh, and that'll load that up. And then you can just resize the panel to suit your content. I'll grab another one. You can do the same thing with StatSeeker reports, so any of your custom reports. You can also, let's just jump straight into the console. Grab Europe and then one of the custom reports. CPU graphs will probably do. Okay, so I can just grab the entire URL of that report. Now it's been filtered by a group. And if I drop that into our panel configuration, if the filters that were applied when I ran the report are contained in the URL, so all of that information goes straight through. And then when I refresh, I've actually got that report as a panel in the dashboard. Now, the report will resize to fit the space available, but you can always resize the panel again to get it the way you want it. Now, let go. Because it's a custom report, it has its own time filters. I can go and change my time filter here. It's passing that time filter through to our other panels. it's not going to pass it through to our custom report. It's got its own time filter built into the top, so I can still be using that. Likewise, I can zoom in. All of the normal custom reporting report functionality is still available, including your click-throughs and links. So you can have your drill downs and stuff which are triggered from inside a panel inside your dashboard, just the way you normally would viewing the report independently. Okay. The other panel types being the table, the clock, and the pie chart. I'm not going to run through those in this session. The panels which are available is something that we're going to add to over time. In future releases, we'll be adding more panel types just to expand on what we can do with our dashboards. And as we saw over in the StatSeeker docs, when I dropped it into that panel, there is additional information, a lot more detail on the dashboards and the options available in the dashboard configurations contained in the dashboard section in the documentation, which is just docs.statseeker.com. Likewise, there's a large number of videos. And now, unlike this video where I've gone on for quite some time, none of these guys are over 3 minutes. Any of the videos here, they're nice and short and sharp, just little bite-sized chunks of useful information. When it does look at the dashboards, it's just going to run through a couple of examples of how to configure those panel types as a way of illustration of how to go about building your own dashboards using them. The content here, again, will be expanded on over time as well, so do drop back and see if there's any new material there for you. This has been quite an extensive session, so thank you very much for your time if you did manage to get all the way through. If you do have any questions, get back to StatSeeker support or your local sales rep, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.